this rainy Monday night. Because I'm going to do a quick little movie review of something I watched over the weekend. The Sound of Metal, which is noticeably very different from the reviews I've been doing lately. I'm not quite as tired as I was in my last review where I was falling asleep during it. Shouldn't have taken so long to get to that one. Or skipped it for the next night, but fuck it. What's done is done. This was a good movie. This was much like one that I made a while back, Nomadland. It was part of the Oscar fair this year. I didn't even watch the Oscars, but I know that I think The Sound of Metal was nominated for Best Picture. I know the lead actor, Riz Ahmed, was nominated for Best Actor. I think it won a bunch of awards with like sound editing and shit, which it definitely deserved. Because it was a movie that's all about sound. As I said, the main actor is Riz Ahmed, who plays a character named Ruben, who's who's a recovering drug addict, who's part of as the name of the movie says, he's part of a metal band, kind of a scream metal band. It's a minimalist scream metal band where he's the drummer and his girlfriend Lou, played by Olivia Cook, is the lead singer slash guitarist. And they're not like a major band, they're like a band that's trying to come up and become something, and they're on tour trying to record an album or something like that. And it seems like everything's going good until one night, just before a show, his hearing just starts going on him. And he goes to the doctor and he gets his hearing tested, and the doctor basically tells him, he's like, you've lost significant portions of your hearing, and chances are it's only going to get worse. You're probably going to go deaf. The doctor tells him, like, first thing he has to do is he has to stay away from loud noises. Now, if you know anything about metal, or any kind of rock and roll really, but especially any kind of rock that goes by the description of metal, it's incredibly loud. It's some of the loudest music you're ever going to hear. In fact, if you go to a metal concert, chances are you will be temporarily deaf afterwards, even if you have perfect fucking hearing. So of course he just, and the doctor also tells him that there's other things he can do, like that there's surgeries to get a thing called a cochlear implant implanted, and he thinks like, oh, well, that's going to fix it. He's like, yeah, but a cochlear implant it can run anywhere to $40,000 to $80,000, and it's not covered by insurance because it's considered elective surgery. So he's like, all right, what am I going to do? So he goes and he performs one night. He goes and he performs the next show without telling his girlfriend anything. And then during the show, he just kind of like fucking walks out, and his girlfriend chases him out, like asking what's wrong with him. And he tells her that he's going deaf. And she understandably freaks out, and he wants to just keep going, saying like, no, he'll figure it out. He can just watch her, and he already knows the song, so it's not a problem. And she's not really concerned about like the tour. She's concerned about the fact that it's like, you're going to go completely deaf if this keeps up, and like, we need to worry about you and your problem. And like I said, he's an ex-addict, so they call his sponsor because he's, noticeably thinking about falling off the wagon. I mean, if anything would throw you off, losing one of your major senses would do that. So his sponsor gets him set up with a deaf community group that helps people who are adjust to losing their hearing, but it's also specifically for people who have addiction problems. And it's run by this guy named Joe, who is himself a recovering alcoholic, who lost his hearing after an injury during the Vietnam War. And he basically explains to Ruben that he's like, we're not here to deal with your problems here. We're here to deal with your problems here. Like this is to help with your psychological issues. It's like there's nothing, you can't fix the hearing. That's gone. You have to learn to get with it mentally. So basically he tells him he can't have any contact to the outside world, no phone, no internet. His girlfriend has to leave, and he almost doesn't want to do it at first, and his girlfriend is just like basically getting ready to leave him. And he said, he basically negotiates with her, like, I'll go to this place, but you got to wait for me and everything like that. He doesn't want to let her go. And so he ends up going into this program, and he can't seem to relax or sit still at first. And, Joe tells him, like, I'm going to give you a room, and you're going to just sit in that room all day, and you're just going to sit there. And when you feel like you can't sit anymore, I want you to just write. He's like, I don't care what you write. It doesn't matter what you write. Just write anything. It doesn't matter. He's like, I want you to write. And then he starts, of course, he has to like learn how to be deaf, and one of the ways to learn how to be deaf is to learn how to communicate. He has to relearn how to communicate when you're deaf. You have to learn sign language, and since he's learning from scratch, he has to basically go to school with like kids at a deaf school for kids, where so he's in a class of kids basically learning how to sign. It's very interesting the way they do this, is because, like I said, the movie is big on sound, so sound is very important, especially early on. It's amazing how crisp and clear all the sounds are, even the background sounds. It's like nothing's really filtered out that much, because it's depicting it how you would actually hear things in a given day, just all the ambient noise you have. And that's something I noticed in the way they did it. It's very interesting because it's kind of like depicting the way that sound happens through him, and then when he starts to lose his hearing, and they change the way he hears, so they change the way the sound is being perceived in the movie, it just to give you a clue of like what is happening to him, how he can't hear things at first, how things sound so far away or so quiet. And then when he goes to this deaf community, at first, like, he doesn't know sign language, but they all do, and they're all signing and communicating, but there's no subtitles to it. You don't know what they're saying because he doesn't know what they're saying. You're giving everything through Ruben's perspective. So he's completely in the dark. He can't communicate with anybody. He's just completely left out. So he's just alone in a crowd of people talking all around him, and he doesn't know what they're saying. Sometimes he can get the indication that they're talking about him. And, he keeps sneaking into, like, a room in the house to, like, check his email, even though he's not supposed to just see that his girlfriend's keeping in touch with him. And, as time goes on, he starts to learn things better, so he starts to learn sign language. And when he starts understanding sign language, that's when they start putting the subtitles for sign language in, because now that he understands it, we're allowed to understand it too. The audience is allowed to understand it, because everything is through his perspective. And he gets better, he starts connecting with these people, he starts developing a life with them. And Joe starts telling him, he's like, you've done very well here, and you're important to a lot of people here. He's like, so I want to start talking about your future. And he goes, I think it's like, I'd like it if you like stayed on here as part of what we're doing. He's like, or you could do that, or split your time with the school. He also gets very close with like the kids at the school, and teaching to them and relating to them. Even like I said, he's a drummer. He's very big into music, and he starts trying to teach them music as best he can. It's kind of hard to teach music when you can't hear, being able to hear is very important to music. Um, it's a it's a really nice moment. It's really nice to see his progress and everything. But then when he sees like his girlfriend is now, like I said, he keeps checking online and the internet to see about his girlfriend. He checks and sees that she's sort of living a life. She's moving on with her life, and he kind of freaks out about that. So he sells like everything he has. He sells like all his audio equipment and everything. He even sells the RV they live in, though with like an option to try to buy it back. And he also, you can get money for the surgery to get the cochlear implant, which he gets. So he gets the cochlear implant, but they can't. It's not just active right away. It basically says like in 4 weeks, they'll turn it on. But now, because of the cochlear implant, the way it's put in, he's now completely deaf. He was almost completely deaf. Now he is completely deaf. Like they've had to circulate. They had to circumvent the way he heard. So his ability to hear is just gone now. It's not like he had really much left to give. So, but whatever. But when he comes back to the deaf community, Joe is kind of like, he says, I hope this is what ultimately makes you happy. But he's like, but you can't be here anymore. He thinks he can still be part of this community. He's like, you really can't, because the whole point of this is for people to accept that losing their hearing isn't a disability, and you being here with your scar and everything, and reminding that you went out of your way to get around this, kind of, it negates that. So he's like, so I'm going to have to ask you to leave. So he basically gets kicked out of his community and doesn't have anything anymore. I'm still not understanding what he does for money. Somehow he ends up in a motel for like 4 weeks, and it's just like, where are you getting money? They never quite explain that. That always confuses me in movies. Like, where the fuck are you getting money? But he eventually goes back to the doctor, and they give him like the little hearing aids you have to have with the attachments to the back of your skull, and they turn it on and adjust it, and everything is like this weird metallic sounding thing. Everything, like his hearing doesn't come back. It's a new type of hearing that it sounds very metallic and far away. So it's not really good, and he's just sitting there going like, what? There's like, this is something you're just going to have to get used to. Like, this is as good as it's going to get. And he's just like, all right. So he then goes to France. Once again, I don't know where he's getting the money for a fucking plane ticket to France. I have no idea. And like he said he didn't have the money for that deaf program he was in, but he was like sponsored by a local church. And so he goes to France, and he meets his girlfriend's father. He meets Lou's father, who's this French guy, and he tells a story about how I guess he basically explains how like Lou was taken away from him when she was young because Lou's mother left her father. And he's like, and then years later, Lou's mother killed herself, and that's what kind of sent Lou into a sort of depressive cycle where I guess she must have got on drugs and stuff, and that's where she and Ruben met, and when they met each other, they got off of drugs. When he first talks about the group, to back up a minute, when he said that when he first joined the group, he said that he'd been off of drugs for 4 years, and he and Lou had been together for 4 years. So when they met, he got off of drugs. And then when he's talking about trying to get her back after getting the cochlear implant, Joe says he sounds very much like an addict, and you get the sort of indication that he never really stopped being an addict. Like, she became his addiction. And so now back at in France, he's there, and she shows up, and her father's throwing a party because he's this very wealthy guy, and he tries to circulate in the party, but everything's so noisy now. He has all this ambient noise that he wasn't dealing with for the past couple, however long he was, at the deaf community, and he can barely hear anybody when they talk to him, and it's just all this trouble, and everything sounds awful because it sounds so staticky and terrible. And as he's walking around, it's very reminiscent of when he first joined the deaf community, and he could see everybody communicating, but he didn't know what they were saying. And it's almost worse in a way because he can kind of hear everything, but he can't understand anything. Not to mention, it's also in France, and he doesn't speak French. And his girlfriend sings a song with her father, and he can barely make out what it is. Like I said, it's in French again, but he can't really hear the tune of it or anything like that because everything just sounds off now. And he and his girlfriend are in bed, and he just basically, while they're talking, he's talking about like all the changes she's made in her life, and he has this weird moment where he's just like, it's okay, and she's like she almost starts crying, like, what are you talking about? And it's like he has this, all of a sudden, this moment of revelation where he realizes this is over. He's like, I can't be a part of this anymore. She's moved on with her life, and I can't no matter how much I try, I can't be a part of it. And then in the morning, he just kind of leaves while she's still asleep, and he's just walking around he's just walking around, and he just sits at a park bench, and he's listening to everybody, and he's listening to the church bells going off, and he's just listening to how everything just sounds so bad, not like it used to. And you see him take off the cochlear the hearing aids for the cochlear implants, and all of a sudden everything's silent again, and he's deaf again. And that's kind of how the movie ends, with him just sort of finally accepting this situation he's in. Like, this whole thing was just a long journey to that. And it's like, it just reminds you of the 5 stages of grief, where there's what are the 5 stages? It's anger, depression, anger, depression, I know bargaining's in there. The last stage is accept. Let me see. I'm drawing a blank now. Let me see. Blah 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 blah. Blah 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 blah. 5 stages. There we go. 5 stages of grief. Are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Yeah, I forgot about denial. Which, yeah, it really does. It really depicts all of those in these movies, because at first he's very much in denial. He's trying to pretend like this isn't happening. And when he just decides, like, no, I can still keep making music, I'll just figure out another way to do it. And then he seems very angry when he has to finally go, when he's being kind of like forced into this new group, this new deaf community that he doesn't want to be a part of at first. And he tries to fight it. And then depression, when his girlfriend doesn't give him a choice, and he just has to go regardless, and he doesn't seem to want to get there. And it seems like maybe he's found some acceptance there, but even then, it's just the first stages of bargaining, because it's just him trying to circumvent what's happening to him by learning the best ways to handle it. And then, the bargaining itself is the cochlear implant. is him trying to be like, well, maybe we can just do this instead and find a way to go back to my old life. But then when he finally does go back, he's burned his bridge on the new life he could have had, and he tries to go back to the old one and realizes he can't. And then after basically just losing one, like he loses his old life, gets a new one, loses that too, and then tries to go back to the original one, he just accepts this is all over. I've lost my hearing. I can't be the man I was anymore. But when dealing with the thing of grief, it really is. I think that's something that we can all, most people can relate to. I haven't lost my hearing. I haven't lost the sense. Knock on, fucking, I can't even reach it. Knock on wood. But I have lost things that were important in my life. I've lost people. That's definitely something you grieve over. So this is definitely a movie that you can relate to on a lot of levels, because it's figuring out how to deal with life-changing struggle, things that happen to you that mean that the way your life was before is not the way your life is ever going to be again, and no matter what you do, nothing about that's going to change. This is the way things are now, and you have to learn to accept it. Yeah. It's somehow a depressing and hopeful movie, but it was really well made, and it was really well acted. I highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. It's funny, a lot of movies this year, especially like these Oscar movies, they were all like kind of weirdly depressing. Somebody there's a radio host named Ron Bennington who's been watching a lot of these movies this year, and I remember I was listening to his show a couple weeks back, and he was talking about him, and he said he's like, the thing about these movies, these Oscar movies this year, is that they're all good. But the thing is, I don't feel like I would ever feel the urge to watch any of them ever again. He's like, I don't feel the need to watch any of them ever again. I've watched them all once, and that's it. I don't need to see them anymore. And it's just like, it's true. Because I watched a few of these movies this year. I want to see more of them. But, when I finally can, but he's right. There's no, like, I'll never feel the need to watch this movie again. It's a great movie. Same with Nomadland. I'll never need to watch it again. I watched it once. It left its imprint, but it's like there's nothing more of it to see. But I would recommend watching it once, because it's a great movie about learning to accept something really shitty. That's at its core what it's about. It's about learning to accept life-changing shittiness. Learning to roll with the punches and adapt as best you can. It also makes you feel like you should learn ASL, because you don't know you don't normally run into a lot of deaf people, but when you do, you kind of feel bad that you can't communicate with them. I mean, life's already been rough. You should at least try to. I've never been good at learning new languages. Yeah, but being in a group where you couldn't be able to communicate with people at all, that would be fucked up. That must suck. Alright, I'm just starting to ramble now. Yeah, Sound of Metal, 2 thumbs up. Great movie. Highly recommend it. So, yeah. I'm going to be watching more for the foreseeable future. I'll be watching movies probably like every Saturday night. So I should usually have something at least once a week, and maybe more depending on, shows that come and go, which there should be more coming up. So, oh, I don't know. With my whole situation now, everything's still so up in the air. I fucking hate it, but that seems to be the way things will be, at least for the time being. So, I'll probably have another one of these ready to go next week. So, until then.